Joining me now, Congressman Darrell Issa, House Foreign Affairs, and former CIA Station Chief Dan Hoffman. First to you, Congressman, are we going to get our Americans out? Because the White House is now saying there's no guarantee that will happen.
Well, we're going to get the vast majority of Americans out. If they're in Kabul, we'll get them out. We're working on both U.S. and non-U.S. citizens that are outside of Kabul, and the ability to move in the country now is extremely difficult. So there will probably be some that do not get out initially, and that's unavoidable. The important thing is, of course, that every day that goes by, the risk to the 5,000 Marines and other military personnel grows. The attack we saw will only be repeated if we stay there much longer.
You know, Dan, the president last night said a forceful response to ISIS and the terrorists who did the suicide bombings. Do you believe that? Because, you know, the mistakes are pretty sundry and numerous. Biden, for example, said the military advised him surrendering Bagram Air Base was the right thing to do, but it shows the transcripts out of the Pentagon. It shows Biden did not want to send in extra troops to secure Bagram Air Base and the embassy. So there's a long list of mistakes here. Is he going to do a forceful response like he promised?
No, I don't see how we could. You're right about the mistakes. We should have held on to Bagram Air Base. That's a far more secure location than the airport. Look, when you have threats like this from ISIS, and they are acute, persistent, clear threats, the first thing you want to do, if possible, is get off the X. That's not possible for us. We're stuck at the airport. The next thing you want to do is extend your perimeter. Well, we're relying on the Taliban for security outside the wire, and that's obviously not safe. They're not a disciplined force, they're not security professionals, and they for sure don't have our best interests at heart. The third thing you want to do is take the fight to the enemy. And the way you do that is with intelligence, to find and fix the terrorists, and with the military, kinetic strikes as appropriate. Where's the over-the-horizon capability right now to strike those targets before they target us? I don't think it's there. It's not going to be there. And that's the problem we're going to face in the region and beyond once we leave.
You know, Congressman, to Dan's point, you know, the Pentagon can't rule out Taliban involvement. The Taliban has never renounced al-Qaeda. So, you know, the Taliban freed jihadis, thousands of them, including al-Qaeda and ISIS, from prison. So how do you go forward with that footing?
Well, I think you have to assume that there'll be no goodwill by either of these groups. The Taliban are going to be haphazard at best as to our priorities. And after the 31st, there's no question that they have an incentive to encourage us to be attacked. So getting things done before the 31st, being wheels up by that time, and then making the decisions about whether or not we can force the president to keep his promise and to continue extricating Americans that have been left behind that want to get out, and that will be most, if not all, Americans. But you don't understand, there's the bigger problem. There's 37 million people that are being abandoned. There are 2 provinces that are still fighting for their freedom in the Northern Alliance. And that's also going to, after the 31st, be a bone of contention for all of us who have served in the military and who know that you win a war and the politicians give it away, you then have to fight another war somewhere. I don't want our troops fighting a war in Israel, in Lebanon. I don't want them fighting a war in Ukraine. I don't want them fighting a war over Taiwan. But that is all real in light of this kind of a debacle. This is not a war that we lost. This is a peace that was lost by the abandonment of Bagram, by the abandonment of the military that expected us to give them air support, and we stopped doing it.
You know, to the congressman's point, Dan, this isn't over. It's sort of like the administration, the senses that we leave Afghanistan and then it's done. It's not over. I mean, this is ongoing. And, you know, the president last night was criticized for leaving his press conference after just one tough question from Fox News' Peter Doocy. He was asked, you know, you said the buck stops with you. Do you accept responsibility? The president said he does, but then he blamed Trump's deal with the Taliban. He's the commander-in-chief. The door shut long ago on blaming Trump. Where in Trump's plan did it say to surrender Bagram Air Base in the dead of night and not tell anyone?
I've encouraged people to leave the past administration out of this. You know, this administration swiveled in a new direction when it came to the Iran nuclear deal and the Paris Climate Accord and a host of other things. So, you know, it's on the current administration to deal with these challenges. What I would emphasize in the near term, ISIS wants to own the narrative. That's why they're targeting us. They want to make it appear like they were the ones that forced us out of Afghanistan because of these terrorist attacks. Going forward, for sure, we are at great risk. And I think it's the irony of ironies right now. We've talked about this a lot, but on the eve of September 11, the 20th anniversary, Afghanistan represents more of a clear and present danger to our country and our allies than ever before.
Yeah, we hear you. And by the way, the president has been in D.C. since the Nixon administration. He was on Senate Foreign Relations, and he was vice president for 8 of the 20 years we were in Afghanistan. Congressman, the Pentagon cannot rule out Taliban involvement yesterday. Should we trust the Taliban?
No, we shouldn't. And the reality is we have to expect additional attacks. You know, our men and women who are going in harm's way are well aware that it is not if, but when there will be another one of these type of attacks. If we're lucky, we'll thwart it. If we're lucky, it'll be a vest and we'll be able to stop him before he kills one or more of our people. If we're unlucky, it'll be a truck bomb and it'll take out a massive amount of people. That's real, and every day, every minute we're there, that risk continues. And as Dan said, there are certain things you do to reduce that threat. We're not doing any of those things right now. We are, by definition, sitting ducks. All we are doing is trying to move our people out, and every minute that goes by, ISIS-K is in fact plotting additional attacks of this sort in order to truly humiliate America on its way out.
To the congressman's point, the Taliban's new chief of security and also its deputy leader were designated terrorists by the U.S. government, subject to multi-million-dollar rewards. So relying on Talibanists who gave safe harbor to 9/11 attackers, who will do anything to injure Americans and have spent years killing Americans, they're going to screen out jihadis who want to kill Americans at the airport? What do you say?
I mean, that's the last thing they're going to do. I think the Taliban's more interested in Afghan interpreters and others who have helped us, hunting them down and preventing them from getting to the airport. They're not going to risk their lives by patting down a suspect terrorist. That's certainly not in their interest, and I'm sure that they're allowing ISIS to surveil the airport and determine weak points where they can target us. You're right. The head of security for Kabul is Khalil Haqqani, the head of the Haqqani network, notorious for allowing al-Qaeda to homestead on their territory and conducting ruthless suicide attacks against coalition forces and innocent civilians in Afghanistan. And the Taliban Minister of Defense, Mullah Zakir, was a Gitmo detainee. So that's what we're dealing with, and we best not outsource our security to the Taliban. That's what we're doing right now. I would just add one last thing. I've served 3 years of my life in war zones, side by side U.S. military, State Department, and the intelligence community. All that we ever asked from any administration was that they give us the force and the equipment that we need to execute the mission and protect ourselves as much as possible. We know we're at risk, but just give us what we need to do the best we can. And that's not what's happening right now. And that is the tragedy of all of this.
You know, and to Dan's point, Congressman, NATO, the UK, allies also saying the same thing, Congressman. They're really ramping up the criticism of the president, saying he botched it by telegraphing and broadcasting a unilateral withdrawal on a set date, then rushing the withdrawal. Remember, the late Senator John McCain warned that Secretary of State Antony Blinken was the wrong guy to be involved here because Blinken wrongfully focused on a date-driven withdrawal versus a conditions-based withdrawal. It seems like we surrendered a lot of leverage here. What do you say?
Well, we not only surrendered, but we did it in a way that was particularly reprehensible. We pulled our troops out and then asked the Turks to leave 1,000 troops in, which they decided not to do and began pulling their people out. But they basically said, why would we be the last ones out, especially under the conditions that they didn't have the air support. So the plan was at best embarrassing, and at worst it was deliberately designed to lead to this outcome, probably not at the speed it happened, but it certainly happened at a speed that shows that the plan was doomed from the first day, but it didn't have to be. If Bagram were open and there were even a few hundred troops there to guard it and the air assets, we would not be dealing with the disaster we're dealing with. Just the opposite. The Afghan military would not have collapsed if they'd had the kind of support they were used to in the field. But when they didn't have it, they surrendered, and that's where we are today.